Chapter 1. The Weight of a Name. The plane climbed steadily into the sky, a sleek silver bird slicing through the endless blue. 10-year-old Noah Bennett sat in first class. His small frame nestled into the wide leather seat. He pressed his forehead against the cool window, watching as the city below shrank into a hazy patchwork of lights and shadows. The hum of the engines vibrated faintly through the cabin, a constant, soothing drone that felt both distant and close. His fingers curled around the armrest, the metal smooth and cold beneath his touch. Noah was alone, but not truly. His mind buzzed with echoes of his father's voice, James Bennett, a man whose name was synonymous with power, wealth, and an airline empire that spanned continents. Noah, James had said just days ago, his tone firm yet warm, always hold your head high. The world might try to box you in, but you decide who you are. The words had settled into Noah like seeds in fertile soil, quiet but heavy, waiting to grow. The cabin smelled of polished wood and crisp linen. A world apart from the crowded streets, Noah had glimpsed below. Around him, the soft murmur of adult voices drifted like background music. Business deals, vacation plans, idle chatter. None of it touched him. His wide, hazel eyes roamed the space, taking in the passengers who barely noticed him. To them, he was invisible, a kid in a place he shouldn't be. And yet, he felt the weight of their assumptions pressing against him, unspoken but real. A flight attendant approached, her heels clicking softly against the carpeted floor. Her name, tag read Claire. She moved with the practiced elegance of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. But when her gaze landed on Noah, something shifted. Her eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. She stopped beside his seat, her posture stiffening. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clipped, tinged with an edge Noah couldn't quite name. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Noah blinked, caught off guard but steady. "Yes, ma'am. I'm traveling alone. I'm allowed to be here." His words were clear, his tone polite. But a tiny thread of uncertainty wove through him. Claire's lips pursed as she studied him, her gaze lingering on his worn sneakers and the backpack tucked under his seat. "This is first class," she said, her voice dropping into something colder, more dismissive. "You don't belong here." Heat flared in Noah's chest, a sudden rush that tightened his throat. "I do belong here," he said. Louder now, the words ringing in the small space. Claire's expression didn't soften. She tilted her head, skepticism hardening her features. "A kid like you? In first class?" She gave a short, incredulous laugh. "You should go back where you came from." Noah's hands balled into fists, his nails digging into his palms. Something sharp and unfamiliar surged inside him. Anger, yes. But more than that. It was the sting of being judged, of being reduced to nothing because of how he looked, how young he was. "I don't need your permission," he said, his voice trembling with the force of it. "I belong here." The cabin went still. Eyes turned toward him, passengers stirring from their private worlds. Claire's face tightened, her lips thinning into a hard line. Then, without warning, her hand flashed out, striking Noah across the cheek. The slap echoed, a sharp crack that hung in the air. Pain bloomed hot and fast across his skin, and the silence that followed was deafening. Noah's breath hitched, his hand flying to his stinging cheek. Embarrassment burned in his gut, mingling with a raw, pulsing sense of unfairness. Around him, the cabin came alive with whispers, a ripple of unease spreading through the passengers. "You shouldn't have done that." A man muttered from a few seats away, his voice low but firm. Claire froze, her eyes widening as if she'd just realized what she'd done. Noah glared at her, his small frame trembling but unyielding. A single tear welled up, threatening to spill, but he swiped it away with the back of his hand. This wasn't over. Not yet. Chapter 2. A tide rising. The hum of the plane's engines grew louder, a steady pulse that matched the racing beat of Noah's heart. His cheek throbbed, the sting of Claire's slap a constant reminder of the moment he'd been pushed too far. The cabin felt smaller now, the air thick with tension. Every pair of eyes seemed to dart between him and Claire, their expressions a mix of shock, discomfort, and curiosity. Noah sat rigid in his seat, his hands still clenched in his lap. The humiliation was there, a hot coal in his chest, but it was fading, overtaken by something fiercer. Anger coursed through him, not just for himself, but for the way Claire had looked at him, like he was less than human. Like his presence was an insult to her perfect little world. He wasn't just a kid anymore. Not in this moment. Across the aisle, a man in a crisp gray suit stood up, his jaw tight. "What's wrong with you?" he snapped at Claire, his voice cutting through the stillness. "You don't hit a kid like that." Claire turned, her face flushing red with a mix of defiance and guilt. I didn't mean," she stammered, but her words crumbled, weak and unsteady. The man shook his head, his disgust plain. "No," he said sharply. "You don't get to make excuses. You don't treat someone like that, no matter who they are." Another voice joined in, this one from a woman near the back. "You can't just lash out because he doesn't fit your idea of who belongs here. That's not how this works." The murmurs grew louder, a chorus of disapproval rising around Claire. She shrank under the weight of it, her confidence unraveling. Noah watched her, his eyes locked on her face. He didn't need to speak. The passengers were doing it for him. There were the shield he hadn't expected. The cabin door swung open, and a new figure stepped into the fray. The pilot, a tall man with graying hair and a calm, commanding presence, strode down the aisle. His eyes swept over the scene, taking in Noah's tense posture, Claire's flushed face, and the restless passengers. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice even but carrying an authority that silenced the room. Noah's pulse quickened, sweat prickling along his palms. He didn't know what would happen next, but he felt ready to stand, to speak, to face whatever came. Claire opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Shame flickered across her features, and Noah saw it, but it wasn't enough. He didn't want to regret. He wanted her to understand. Before she could find her voice, Noah stood. His legs shook slightly, but his words were steady. "I'm not just some kid," he said, his small voice filling the space with quiet power. "I belong here." The pilot's gaze shifted to him, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Then, slowly, recognition dawned. He turned to the passengers, his tone firm but measured. "This is Noah Bennett, son of James Bennett, the owner of this airline. He has every right to be in first class." A hush fell over the cabin, heavy and electric. Noah's breath caught as the weight of his name settled over the room. The passengers stared at him, their faces softening, shifting from confusion to respect. Claire, though, stood rooted to the spot, her skin pale, her mistake crashing down around her like a wave. Noah looked around, the sting in his cheek fading beneath a swelling sense of pride. He'd been tested, pushed to the edge, and he hadn't backed down. He wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was part of something bigger, something he was only beginning to understand. Chapter 3. A New Horizon. The tension in the cabin dissolved into a quiet hum as the plane continued its flight. Noah sat back down, his body still buzzing with adrenaline. The passengers' eyes lingered on him, but now they carried a different weight, acknowledgement, maybe even admiration. He wasn't invisible anymore. The pilot crouched beside him, his voice low and steady. "You handle that better than most grown-ups would have," he said. "Standing up like that? That's strength. That's leadership." Noah nodded, the words sinking in. It wasn't just about winning a fight. It was about dignity, about claiming his place in a world that didn't always want to make room for him. His father's empire might have opened the door, but it was Noah who'd walked through it. The rest of the flight passed in a blur. Claire avoided him, her movements stiff and subdued as she tended to other passengers. When she finally approached, her eyes were downcast, her voice soft with remorse. "I'm sorry," she said. "I shouldn't have done that." Noah looked at her, calm in a way that surprised even himself. "It's okay," he replied. "Just don't forget, everyone deserves respect." She nodded, a faint flush creeping up her neck, and retreated without another word. Noah turned back to the window, the sky stretching out endlessly before him. The plane began its descent, the world below coming into sharper focus. But inside, Noah felt something shift. Leadership wasn't about power or wealth. It was about understanding, about lifting others up even when they try to push you down. When the plane touched down in Phoenix, the doors opened with a soft hiss, and Noah stepped into the terminal. The buzz of the airport washed over him. Announcements crackling overhead, the steady flow of people rushing past. It felt surreal, stepping back into the everyday after what he'd been through. At the end of the jetway, his mother, Emily, waited. Her dark hair framed a face that radiated warmth and strength. Her smile cutting through the chaos like a lifeline. "Noah," she called, her arms opening wide. He ran to her, burying himself in her embrace. For a moment, the world melted away. Just him and his mom, safe and whole. "Hey, Mom," he said, pulling back to meet her gaze. His eyes sparkled, but there was something new in them, a depth she couldn't miss. Emily's brow furrowed as she brushed a hand across his cheek, noticing the faint redness. "What happened?" she asked, concern threading through her voice. "You seem different." "I'm okay," Noah said, offering a small smile. "I just learned a lot up there." She studied him, sensing the shift. "Do you want to talk about it?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Someone treated me badly, Mom. But it wasn't just about that. It was about how people judge you without knowing you. I had to stand up for myself." Emily's heart swelled with pride, though a pang of sadness tugged at her. Her little boy was growing up faster than she'd expected. "You're becoming someone incredible, Noah," she said softly, brushing a tear from her eye. "It's not about the name or the money. It's about how you treat people. That's where your strength comes from." "I know," he said, his voice steady. "I want to make a difference, Mom. Not just as Dad's son, but as me." She smiled, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You will, Noah. You'll find your own way." As they walked toward the exit, the Arizona sun spilled through the glass doors, warm and bright. Noah felt the weight of the day settle into something new. Not a burden, but a foundation. He'd learned something no one could teach him. The power of his own voice, the resilience of his spirit. This was just the beginning. Chapter 4. The Journey Ahead. The airport hummed around them as Noah and Emily made their way to the car. Outside, the desert air hit him, dry and sharp, a stark contrast to the cool cabin he'd left behind. He climbed into the passenger seat, his backpack at his feet, and stared out the window as the city unfolded. Sprawling streets, shimmering heat, a world that felt both familiar and strange. "You're quiet," Emily said, glancing at him as she drove. "Still thinking about the flight?" "Yeah," Noah admitted, tracing a finger along the edge of the window. "It was bigger than I thought it'd be. I didn't just stand up for myself, Mom. I think I stood up for something else, too." She nodded, her eyes soft but searching. "That's what growing up is, Noah. Finding out who you are and what you'll fight for." He thought about that, the pilot's words echoing in his mind. Leadership, dignity, respect. They weren't just ideas, they were choices. Ones he'd have to keep making. His father's name might carry weight, but Noah wanted more than that. He wanted to build something of his own, something that mattered. Back home, the house was quiet. The late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the living room. Noah dropped his bag by the door and sank into the couch, the events of the day replaying in his head. Emily sat beside him, her presence steady and grounding. "Dad always says to carry myself with dignity," Noah said after a while. "I think I get it now. It's not about what people think of you. It's about what you know is right." Emily smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Your dad's a smart man.